Okay, next up on the agenda is a public hearing on the establishment of a progressive development overlay district at 875 Publishers Parkway to allow for senior housing in an OP district. And
Thank you.
we have the developer who's proposing this in attendance tonight, and we also have the engineering firm Passero who has put together the drawings. Now, since, Jess, I feel like this is Groundhog's Day, even though we're 2 days out. I appreciate the plans are up there and all that. I think in the last year, the plans have been up there no less than 2 times, maybe 3 times prior to this. Because it's a public hearing, certainly if you want to present your reasons why you think the town board should issue you this.
Yeah, absolutely. If you don't mind,
Yes?
I'll jump in. Yeah, because it's a public hearing for the first time, some of the information that I'll provide might be a little bit repetitive for this board. So I apologize for that in advance, but I'll try to move through it relatively quickly. But, we have been at this for over a year. We first appeared before this board back in, I believe, December of 2019, known as the pre-COVID era. But again, Jess Sudol from Passero Associates. Here with me this evening is Matt Newcomb, the project manager, also from Passero, and Carl Schuler from Union Crossing, who is the developer and the applicant. Our proposal is for a progressive development district and special use permit to support 194 units of senior housing on approximately 24 acres. And it's located on the northwest corner of Route 104 and Hard Road south of Publishers Parkway. The proposal includes 2 four-story buildings at the core of the development, which represents 110 units, and then the remaining area of development is all single-story townhomes that kind of flank the 4-story buildings and are around the perimeter, out closer to the roads where they might be more visible. The idea here is to provide high-quality housing options in conformance, or along with recommendations of the town's comprehensive plan for seniors. We really do have 2 different housing options here. For the more active, I don't want to say younger, but for the more active seniors, we think the townhomes with their own individual garages would be a lot more attractive. But, as those seniors age in place or come from other areas of town, we do have the option, especially if they're mobility impaired, for the multifamily buildings, which have the shorter corridors, they have the elevators, and a lot of amenities that, make housing a lot easier than some of the other options they might be coming from, such as a single-family home. As I pointed out in the past, I don't want to beat this dead horse, if you will, but I do want to mention again, especially for those not terribly familiar with the project or listening for the first time, the concept of senior housing on this site was first introduced to the town over 6 years ago. We, back then, received approval for 210 units on the entire 30-plus acre site. Since then, this 6-acre portion that you see highlighted in red on the right side was sold and developed by U of R. I'm not terribly familiar with that project, so I can't speak to it in detail, but I believe it is currently under construction. That was for a medical office building, which is allowed as of right in this district. This is part of the OP, the Core Area North Office Park District. This particular district allows a number of uses. It allows as of right, meaning you don't need a special approval or you don't need a rezone or variances or a PDD or anything like that. It allows hotels. It also allows office buildings. It allows communication towers. So there are a number of uses that are permitted here. I know there's been a lot of concerns as we've gone through this process and as we've heard from the public about green space, but we're not proposing any change in zoning that would limit the amount of green space compared to some of these other development alternatives that, again, could be built here as of right. But going back to our plan, I do want to point out a few things as it relates to the previous approval. Again, that was granted in 2015. There was a number of extensions. Those since expired over the course of time. But most notably, what we've done is we've gone from 3 stories to 4 stories with our building in the middle, which has allowed us to really cluster the development. The town's comprehensive plan talks a lot about trying to limit building footprint area because that leads to things like stormwater impact. It also reduces green space. So by going from 3 stories to 4, we've been able to limit the amount of disturbance. We've limited the amount of impervious surfaces. We've limited the amount of stormwater management that we need. One of the things that we've done I really want to point out is we've significantly increased the buffer along 104. I think over the years the town has done a really good job in ensuring that wooded buffer and screening is maintained as you drive down 104 from the bridge to the outskirts of town, especially on the north side, pretty much uniformly. That exists as you travel from east to west. You can really notice it. But previously we only had about a 75-foot buffer that was approved. And again, we've more than doubled that, so that's nearly 160 feet where we would keep all that existing vegetation. So from 104, you really wouldn't even be able to see our project. And again, that was accomplished by going from 3 to 4 stories and really sucking in the size of the disturbed area. Another thing that allowed us to do, if you compare the 2 plans, we previously had some of those townhome units up close to Publishers Parkway. We're able to pull them out of there to provide a very large green space and lawn area between the first building, if you will, and Publishers Parkway. And so, what we're really trying to do is limit the amount of impact from the project. After we last met with this board, the project went to the planning board. They had several comments and things that they asked us to look at, a number of studies that we've performed since then. We've done a traffic study, we've done a sewer study, we've done a line of sight study, we've done a market study. I do want to point out the results of the line of sight study show that, even though we did go from 3 stories to 4, it's unless you're really looking for those buildings, you're most likely not going to notice them. We're nearly 700 feet from Publishers Parkway, so if you think about it, that's, obviously more than 2 football fields away. And then from Hard Road on our east side, which is kind of the more significant thoroughfare or arterial, we're more than 1,000 feet away to those buildings. So when we look at that in profile, we more or less demonstrated that you're not going to be able to see those buildings unless you know exactly where to look and when to look and are intentionally trying to see them. And again, all that was by design and really keeping those centered in the project to maximize their distance from the various roadways. And then most importantly, the project is now 60% green space. The OP district with the PDD requires a minimum of 30% green space. So in this case, we are double what the minimum amount of green space is required. So I think that's important, especially, a lot of people, again, have commented on the green space. With this approach that we're proposing, we are doubling the allowable amount of green space. For comparison purposes, I'm going to do this without these all falling down on me. This is just one example, and I think we passed out some smaller versions of, what this thing could possibly look like if it was developed as an office park, which is an allowed use in that district. In no way are we proposing that, but we're showing it as an alternative. And a plan like this most likely wouldn't even need to come before this board. It could go straight to the planning board for site plan approval, much in the same way the U of R building did. So, I think it's important at least to state that, when thinking about why should we grant a PDD or why does this make sense for the area, well, one of the reasons is, because if the parcel is left and we are not the ones that develop it and somebody else comes in here and decides to do office buildings or light industrial with manufacturing, warehousing, which is allowed with a special use permit, it could have far more lot coverage, much less setbacks, and things of that nature. I don't think there's any reason to go into great detail with that plan. It was just for comparison's sake to show what else could be built here. And, obviously, sorry, I'll try to talk in the microphone. A project such as that would have significantly more impact when it comes to the amount of traffic that's generated. Senior housing is, in terms of impact, really one of has the least amount of impact compared to almost any other development. For example, there's very minimal traffic generated. It's only about 0.16 vehicles per unit, which is a fraction of other comparable uses. Certainly anything that was commercial or medical office or even regular multifamily market rate housing, certainly a lot less than single family housing. So it's a very, very low traffic generator. I know there was a lot of concerns from the public on potential traffic impacts. Again, those results were shown through the traffic study that it doesn't have a detrimental impact. Again, compared to those other uses that are allowed in this district, I think we would generate the least amount of traffic of any other proposal that could potentially come here in the future. Noise, odors, lighting is all far, far less than a commercial style development, which is allowed as of right, and certainly, again, far more green space and buffering than any of those alternatives. You know, the comprehensive plan, you know, again, I'm trying, Mr. Supervisor, I'm going to stick with your theme a bit of why should we even consider this. The comp plan specifically talks about, you know, focusing development to the core area, and this is part of the core area, and it's called the North Office Park, in an effort to reduce pressure for housing needs elsewhere in town in more rural areas outside of kind of the main corridor of 104 and Ridge Road. So, you know, for that reason, staying in, you know, we're not going somewhere else trying to get a rezone or anything like that in a single-family neighborhood. Again, one of the benefits of this site is we don't have any single-family neighbors, and I can't tell you how many senior projects or multifamily projects we've come across where one of our entire property lines is all senior or single-family homes with their backyards. That's not the case here. We have, you know, a sports facility near us. We have Mirashow Management. You know, we're really not impacting anybody's homes in terms of line of sight or anything like that. And again, it's very low impact to begin with. But that was really the basis for the zoning designation that the town made a long time ago, designating those core areas to focus development. And not just office parks, the comp plan and the PDD provision of the OP district specifically talks about ways to allow for senior housing to occur in this district as a goal. So we see, you know, again, why should we do this? Well, it's much less impact than the alternatives. It's being built, you know, it's satisfying a housing need as demonstrated by our market study. And we're focusing the development in a way that's in line with the comp plan and with the actual zoning code that talks about how and where this type of thing should occur. I think that everybody received a letter that was submitted from our office. It basically talks about everything I'm talking about in a lot more detail, so I won't...
It actually just, I mean, the town board has been given all the documents, all the studies and all that, so, and I'm sure that'll come up when we close out the public hearing. Because as far as I see, you know, you're presenting, and you're presenting as a thumbs up to doing the project and issuing the PDD. We now have the public, and as you know, because of COVID, we don't have the public all in this room, so the public is going to get the opportunity, and they already have. I have several emails I need to read here to get this into the record of the public hearing, and we also are going to open up the phone lines for anybody that calls in. And these emails and these phone calls during the public hearing could be thumbs up, they love it, and they're with you on this, or they could be people that are talking against it. So,
yeah, and I'll wrap this up so we can get into some of that public comment, but I imagine that a lot of the public comment focuses on open space / green space and traffic, and I just want to reiterate that based on the zoning district this is located in, you know, our proposal, I would, you know, be willing to bet is going to be a lot more green space than any other proposal that would come through for the Office Park District and generates far less traffic than any of the other allowed uses in this district. I think a lot of times people might look at a site like this and say, well, we just want to stay green forever. You know, there are certain zoning classifications for that. But in this case, it is zoned to allow all those different things I talked about. And I think that what we're proposing is really the least amount of impact that provides the most green space and the least amount of traffic, you know, which I don't think you might necessarily see if we were to leave and somebody were to go straight to the planning board for site plan approval of, you know, 200,000 square feet of distribution and warehousing. So with that, I'll turn it over unless anyone has questions for me.
I do not.
Oh, there there is one other thing I wanted to mention. I'm not going to hand these out. One of the things that we did in preparing for this meeting and while we've been working on the project is we did look for precedent, because you might say, well, it's too dense or the setbacks aren't big enough. And I can hand these out, but the closest comparable project that we found is over on Holt Road. There's the existing senior project. I think it's called the Legends. That's also a senior project. It's north of 104. It's in the OP district. It's more or less one relatively large block over from us. And in that case, the density was approximately 16 units per acre, so it was more than double what we are. Had 30% green space, so we have twice the amount of green space as that project. And their setbacks from Holt Road were only about 75 feet, whereas we're 1,000 feet to our 3 stories building. So in terms of, talking about setbacks and density and impact, I found it interesting that looking at a comparable project that received the PDD, that was approved in the OP district, one road over for us, I think when we look at ourselves in that regard, we way more green space, way less desks, et cetera. I think everybody gets the point.
Thanks, Jess. And as everybody knows, public hearings during the COVID era with the governor's executive orders and all that on people not being able to come into the boardroom, I just want to put the 800-pound gorilla out there right now, is that the fact that the developer and the engineer get to come in and in person present is somewhat not fair to the public who wants to get their comments in. In normal times, if the public wanted to put 50 people in here and all go up there and talk, they could. So it's with that preface that I say I think only to be fair that I will read each of these 14 emails that we got, and they will go into the record, Dolly, where they can. And then once I'm done with those, I'm hoping that Karen in the production room can flash on the screen for anybody watching at home, that we will open it up for 5 minutes for any phone calls from the public that wants to come in. So, I am going to try to read these quickly, but not so fast that I'm not giving them the due respect they deserve. Chris Jones at 903 Joylene Drive emailed in and said, "The people of Webster do not want this approved. Please do your job and represent the people of Webster." And then Rachel Palmero emailed, "I'm opposed to further building on the land at 875 Publishers. The traffic from both schools located there is horrendous as it is. There is already new development close to the 104 Expressway and hard that causes traffic delays and congestion. We have enough senior living facilities in the area. Keep the land green. Wildlife has nowhere to go at this point." An anonymous emailer said, "Please do not approve. The social and economic impact to the town of Webster will be devastatingly damaging. Keep Webster and the green space that is left intact. Stop overdeveloping Webster. Webster citizens live here because they do not want to be in crime-ridden Greece or Gates or Irondequoit." Subjective statement. Let alone the impact on traffic flow and safety of pedestrians, bicyclists, and any type of travel. No need for high-rise eyesore buildings and in demolishing of green space. Stop. No more development. I'm going to say again, I'm going to err on the side of caution because that person could be standing at that podium and say those words. And there's nothing we could do to stop them. So if any of my friends in those towns that were mentioned that when are listening, I apologize. I don't know if that's accurate about your towns. In fact, I don't think it is. Samantha Swan at 528 Lake Road says, please, enough with the building. It's not necessary for people or the planet. Enough greed, enough wealth. Webster is one of the few Rochester suburbs that is still beautiful. Ridge Road is hideous enough, please, enough. Doreen Genga of 728 Northbrook Way says, too much traffic already with 2 large schools, businesses, and sports complex. Already have a lot of apartments for seniors, no more, thank you. Melissa Zeller on Bending Bow Drive says, in my opinion, as a Webster native, 40 years and living off Hard Road currently, children attending Thomas High, this housing is not necessary. Traffic during school hours and activities is quite something to be in and of itself, along with the Marquee Senior Living that was just built a few years ago, and Winding Creek Apartments at the intersection created more traffic.
Let's please add CDS Monarch that provides more services and support and transportation to the intersection and Webster Bus Transportation and Highway Department traffic. How could this area support more senior housing within the projected area? Sports events at the Ice Arena and Lakefront Soccer Club and at both schools will be very busy at times. I think this is a definite no. Daniel Steensma of 815 Tinker Tavern Road says, the amount of traffic on Hard Road from existing schools, hotels, shopping facilities, restaurants, and apartment buildings has already strained the capacity of roads in the area to provide safe usage. Frequent traffic backups, accidents, and impatient drivers running red lights are already what people in the area have come to expect. The amount of traffic and traffic-related problems will only intensify when the new URMC facility is operational. How is it possible that we are already discussing the establishment of a progressive development overlay district at 875 Publishers Parkway? I have already witnessed one badly injured person stretched out across Hard Road after a particularly horrible motor vehicle accident. How many more bodies strewn across our streets will it take before the town realizes what it has done to the quality of life in Webster with rapid overdevelopment of the past decade? How much longer will the school gym classes and athletic programs be able to jog down Hard Road? And how much longer will anyone be able to walk to the library? Every day I see an elderly woman walking down Hard Road picking up trash from alongside the road. Perhaps some of the town board members have seen her also. Are you concerned about safety or the safety of our school's children? If so, please vote no to the establishment of a progressive development overlay district at 875 Publishers Parkway, or we might as well change our motto to where life was once worth living. Tracy Siebert Konopko of 1201 Imperial Drive states, please do not allow for more development in the proposed areas, particularly if it means eliminating green space and creating traffic congestion. Let's keep Webster from being an overdeveloped nightmare of a town. So we're getting there, gang. We're on number 9 out of 14. David Naka of 893 Hard Road says, if Webster residents are part of input on town projects, please consider me for this project. Thank you. I believe this is too giant a development for this location and space, so close to the major highway intersections for traffic congestion. Should be at least half the amount of apartment units in size. Property taxes are already high enough. This won't dent our taxation cost enough or at all. It will only make Webster less aesthetically pleasing and bring more sound pollution, but especially while the years it will consume in building infrastructure and buildings. Let's talk traffic implications, air and noise pollution on the Publishers Parkway to the schools and students, especially to the Hard Road 104 intersections and on and off ramps because of the already new road exiting this complex so close to the intersection of Hard Road and 104. This is a major concern with loss of so much green space squeezing so many senior apartments, 194 units into such a small space, not just to current residents already in Webster, but also to quality of life for the future apartment residents, seniors living in a complex with little sight and sound barrier from the constant loud buzz of 104 Expressway right on top of it. Apartment next to the highway is horrible. I know this because I live next to the highway. The constant buzz and sight is not a quality of life. The sleep deprivation and feeling of harassment from noise pollution is all too real. I urge strong consideration of leaving many yards long of trees and green space to prevent sight and sound pollution to future town residents. Also, loss of the green space barrier from 104 bike walkway to the apartments for residents using the paths. And back to size, 100% no to the proposed 2 4-story apartment building. Wow, how ugly and unappealing for the town of Webster. A complete embarrassment to have it viewed every day on 104 replacing green space. Thank you. Scott Nicholson of 771 South Huckleberry Way says, I'm not in favor of the location of this project. To say nothing of the increased traffic, I do not think a 4-story building add to the flavor of town, which has wide open spaces and is still largely rural. An example of this kind of development can be seen next to the Penfield YMCA. That 4-story eyesore is completely out of character in a rural area. I do not oppose development to build the tax base to protect against a Xerox exodus and provide housing for increasing senior demographic, but the amount of available space in Webster, I cannot see how another site would not be more appropriate. I moved here in 2017 from Melbourne, Florida, and I can tell you firsthand that unenlightened development looks like traffic snarls, public service pressure, environmental degradation, and just plain ugliness. In my opinion, this project has to be done smarter. Deborah Thiesing of 811 Hard Road says, my concerns for this change to allow this developer to create the senior housing in this saturated traffic area are many. I realize our area does not seem to have any office park business coming in, and that too would create additional traffic. Changing to overlay to allow this project is ridiculous. I know landowners are allowed to develop their property within the parameters that many times projects make it through and are detriment to the areas. This area is saturated with traffic. I live on the corner of Hard and Publishers, and the traffic, the light is backed up both on Hard and Publishers. School hours being the worst with buses and parents dropping children off. The project across Hard already has 3 buildings of senior housing. Additional housing for non-seniors was built and more are being built at this time. The new URMC project that will share the Hard Road entrance was presented as leaving trees around the parameter, and I would note that I fully expect this project will follow suit. Also, the 2 larger buildings are slated to be 4-story buildings. I know my family and neighbors do not want to look at 4-story buildings, lights on all hours of day and night. I know my concerns may be ridiculous, but Webster residents want less traffic. They want to see trees. They want their town to be beautiful. This type of continued practice makes Webster like every other overbuilt town. Corey Gaffney of 461 Time Drive says, the once quaint town of Webster has lost its charm. I grew up in the Ross area. I'm originally from the west side. And I always had a passion for Webster, something about being close to the water, so much to explore, close enough to stores, necessities, yet not too congested. Well, those times are gone. Webster is growing way too fast. What happened to all the beautiful green spaces? Instead, I find myself stuck in traffic, while construction trucks are constantly driving by and trees continue to come down. I lost count of how many apartment complexes there are now, as I feel at least 2 more went up within the last few years. The stores are always packed, and we already have 2 high schools. Not a day goes by that I don't wonder what this area will be like once my kids become school age. Ontario is looking more and more enticing. Adding 4-story senior apartments in addition to the recently improved medical building is the last thing this town needs. Joshua Roberts at 622 Preservation Trail says, enough is enough with the developing green space in Webster. Traffic is atrocious already on many of the roadways and plazas. If we keep developing, we will be in the same shoes of the towns of Greece and Henrietta. Overdeveloped and empty commercial buildings, which we already have too many of. Not to mention there is already a large senior living complex in the area. Webster does not need any more development until we can fill already vacant facilities in town. I stand firmly against it. And last but not least, I didn't get a chance to print this. Thank you, Karen, for getting it to me digitally. It came in late. Melissa, boy, let's try this again. On Appian Drive, one of the downsides of digital. Let's see if I can. All right, I'm going to have to come back to Melissa's as I have to reboot into the internet. So I guess this is as good a time as ever to ask Karen to put on the screen the call-in number, and it is 8 o'clock. We will open calls for 5 minutes or until the calls cease.
She gave you a thumbs up.
She gave me a thumbs up. Oh, and I was able to, I rebooted. So Melissa on Appian Way says, I have concerns regarding this proposed development. Firstly, the traffic implications onto Hard Road and 104. How much added traffic will this development create for this area? Also, I am concerned by the loss of trees and green space caused by such a large development. The proposed 4-story buildings would be an eyesore in that location. Well, I hope I did those justice. Didn't read them too fast, too slow. And here comes call 1. And I hope I do this correctly. Hello?
Hi, this is David Mata. I sent one of the emails into you. Thank you for reading it. I appreciate it.
You got it, David. Do you have anything to add other than what I read from your email?
Well, I just want to state about the developer. I don't know if that's the gentleman there, but I've called his office twice in the last few days. I don't get a return call, and I don't feel that they respect the people living out here, because if they did, they would have talked to me, because they built this medical building, and I'm trying to get a berm situated between my property and theirs, and I just want to talk to them about it. And
David, I just want the medical building that you're talking about. This developer is not building that medical building. Is that correct?
Okay. I know before I was in charge of both.
No, and I appreciate your call, and and I hope that they respond to you, but that is out of the purview of these gentlemen that are here on behalf of the senior project, and I do appreciate the very detailed email you sent in on this, David. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, take care. Okay. So, like I had said, at least in my short time as supervisor, this was as much documentation that I've ever had to go through for a public hearing / resolution. And I'm not talking about the emails I just read, the traffic studies, the senior housing saturation, multifamily things that were done. No question that there was a lot of energy and effort put into giving the town board the materials. So I appreciate that. Hello?
Hi, this is Debbie Thiesing. I also sent one of those emails in.
Okay, Debbie, do you have anything new to add?
I do. I actually kind of have a question ad type thing. The 4-story buildings, which I do believe are rather tall, and I will see them from my house over the top of Marischal Management very well. Most of the buildings I see around the area that are so many stories, indeed, are almost an additional story tall by the time they add the roofing and all the other stuff that go to it. So I'm imagining that we're actually going to be looking at 5-story buildings and not really 4-story buildings. The apartments across the street directly from us on the other side are 2-story buildings, and I'm going to tell you they're 3-story buildings and lit up all hours of the day, and the little tiny bit of green around them doesn't shut anything off.
Yeah.
So my concern,
Go
concern with the buildings is that the height is going to be, I mean, there's still a few of us neighbors, no matter what anybody says. I'm still here on the corner of Hart and Publishers. I still can see this project. I still will see this project over the top. There still will be lighting. I appreciate that the project has been moved back. None of us had the ability to see any of this because I didn't get any notices of this, so I didn't realize that it had been pushed back, which I appreciate very much. I do understand the buffer, and I totally understand green space. I know Webster has a lot of green space, and that really isn't my issue. It is the height of the buildings is my main concern, and of course the addition to traffic, because it's very horrible on our
Sure,
corner. So,
and Deborah, I will say this, and I'm going to look at Attorney Genesi in the room to correct me if I'm wrong on any of this. If the town board, after this public hearing, whether tonight or at a future town board meeting, approves a PDD, an overlay district, to allow for this of senior housing in this zoning. The town board is not doing the decision on allowing a 4-story or with a roof pitch that makes it 5-story. That, I think, would go before the zoning board of appeals, because a 4-story building is not to our.
Well, it may be the planning board, but the fact is this is really a 2-part process.
I understand this product already was approved many years ago, and I've already gone through that in my head and resolved myself to that whole situation.
Right. Well, that approval is.
Because understandably, this was our entire family farm on all this land. So, this is, of course, 5th generation. It's horrific to look at, but I have no one to blame but my own family for selling the land. But,
I will say this, that the process here, if this gets approved by the town board, this is far from over, and I think the developer and the engineer know that they're going before then planning boards and zoning board of appeals, because the configuration as it stands, I don't think, and Charlie, you said whether it's planning board.
Well, not only that, but in order to obtain the right to put in senior housing in an OP district, you'd have to get a special use permit or a special permit, which would require another set of public hearings.
Yeah, so it's and I will tell you this, at some point, Deborah, whether it's the planning board or the zoning board of appeal, that's when either the letters go to people that live within 100 or 300 feet, or at this time, I know we're starting to transition to big posted signs. But that is down the line, and that's totally contingent on the decision of the town board, either tonight or in future board meetings after this public hearing,
I would have to
on
say that
whether we do an overlay district approval.
I would prefer, my preference would be this type of thing other than more businesses and commercial stuff.
Sure, and Deborah, like I said, I appreciate that you had a very good email, and I appreciate you also calling in.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Good night.
Bye-bye. So if anything, when we do close out the public hearing, I do feel as though the town board members were supplied with a very sufficient amount of information for making a decision on this. I can't speak for all the rest of you, but it was pretty robust.
Yes, we did receive it all. Thank you.
Mr. Supervisor, can I briefly respond to the public comments? It's up to you.
Sure, because I'm gonna say that we're gonna cut the phone calls in 3 minutes if any more come in. So fill in the open air.
Yeah, I'm not going to repeat too much of what I said, but, based on what I heard from a lot of those comments, it seemed like the alternatives that were being considered was green space versus our current proposal. As I mentioned earlier, the alternatives are really senior housing, as we're proposing, versus hotels, light industrial, offices, communication towers, all those other permitted uses. This area, based on zoning, is slated for development. It's not going to remain green. And of all those things I just mentioned, when it comes to traffic, which seemed to be the primary concern, our proposal is going to be much, much, much less traffic. And our traffic studies have already shown that's not going to have a detrimental impact. Because we're not generating much traffic, that's why we don't have much impact. And in terms of the building height, the OP zoning code allows buildings as of right to up to 55 feet. So somebody could come in tomorrow, right here in these people's backyard, and build a 55-foot tall, 4 or 5 story office building, which would have all kinds of lights. We're well under that. We're almost a story shorter with our proposal. Now, again, multifamily buildings have additional regulations.
And Jess, I just want to, for people watching at home, and I just don't want any fears that are unfounded. Nobody's going to go in and build a 5-story office building unless Attorney Genesi got some pretty big variances on that. Is that correct?
Well, I don't have the code in front of me. I'll trust that the comment was correct, but we still have to go to the planning board. The planning board would have the authority to limit the height of the building.
Well, it's the allowable maximum building height in the OP district for the permitted uses is 55 feet. So you could go up to 55 feet with those uses without needing a variance, according to the code. And I'm not saying
Do
that's...
we have I always like to say past performance doesn't dictate future.
Well, and we're also looking at something in front of us, not what.
That's correct, and I just know that I don't think, is there an office building in Webster that is 5 stories?
Not that I'm aware of.
I don't know.
Paychecks on Basket Road is probably close.
Is it?
But that's
industrial.
Yeah. It is, I'm going to give one more minute, Karen, and then we're going to close the public hearing. And if we don't get another call, just for the record, I think the public hearing portion started at 7:33. It will be 8:12, so it was about 39 or 40 minutes. Valley.
Some concerns. And I know as far as what your project is, Jess, correct me if I'm wrong, you said 0.16 or 1.6 as far as vehicles?
Trips per unit?
Yeah.
It's 0.16.
0.16. You've got 405 parking spots slotted, either in the building or outside. I have no idea what the ADTs are, But also don't know offhand if you're aware of the facility that is directly to the west of this. It is the soccer facility.
I've spent many nights there with my daughters.
Okay, so you realize that on Mother's Day, that is the largest tournament in the entire East Coast? And
I've been to that tournament on more than one occasion.
So, same here, especially with 3 daughters that all played. But between that and Hard Road, with the bus garage, the highway garage, and Willing School being added, Hard Road is chaos, it's mayhem, especially trying to get out. I'm trying to get plow trucks out, especially if I'm anywhere near peak drive time. I have no idea what the ADTs or the peak generations you have. I have not seen a traffic study. That's something I'd like to look at. But as far as superintendent highways, I have concerns with the traffic.
Yeah, I mean, we've submitted the traffic study, which I invite you to take a look at. I will say that, especially on weekends, seniors are not out and traveling. I believe that tournament starts on Friday, goes Friday, Saturday, Sunday. As opposed to another allowed use like a hotel. You could put 3 hotels or a 200-bed hotel on the site as of right, 4 stories, which is going to generate a heck of a lot more traffic on a weekend than a senior housing development. So again, if we compare it to what's there today in green space, yeah, we're going to generate some more traffic. But compared to all those other uses, whether it's during the week or during the weekend, our proposal is going to be far less traffic. And I think somebody called in or maybe an email said, we have to think smarter, and we feel that this is smarter. It's less traffic than anything else that's going to go there. It's more trees, it's more green space, it's more buffering. I know compared to green space, it might be, one comparison, but something's going to go there ultimately, and if it's not this, it's going to be something that has a lot more traffic and a lot more impact.
And thank you, Jess, and like I said, I'm sensitive to the fact that there's a inherent unfairness to the public during COVID, so thank you. I just want to make sure, because the only way the public can rebut is calling in, and I'm about to call it a day on the public hearing. And that is at 8:14. We are closing the public hearing. For the record, it was 41 minutes long, I think, if my math is correct. At this point,
I just want to piggyback on what Joe said with respect to traffic. I did read all of our residents' emails and their concerns, and I actually drove to Publishers Parkway this afternoon at 3:08, and I sat in traffic for 20 minutes as parents entered Thomas, exited Thomas, and it was, the circumstances were, if there's going to be an accident at some point. It's a 2-lane road. It's not that wide. There's minimal shoulder there. In this line of traffic with the parents picking up and dropping off their kids is not COVID related. I mean, this has been going on for years. Sure. And I was it just verified, by doing that, verified what one of the major concerns of these residents are. And I also agree with the 4-story buildings. They're just very unsightly. I've never been a proponent of these 4-story buildings. I realize that there are some senior housing 4 stories on, I think it's Holt Road. And I believe there were some informal conversations at one point that those were allowed at that point, but there was going to be future discussions about disallowing the 4-story building. So now I don't know whether we do something, we have conversations down the road with respect to this OP zoning and adjust it accordingly. And but as Tom said, the Supervisor Flaherty said, holy smokes, we're looking at the project in front of us, and those are my 2 major concerns. The traffic exists right now, and it's very bad, and adding 194 units is not going to make things better.
Well, the traffic is exactly
Jess, I'm gonna.
Okay.
And John, the public hearing is over. So, John, I think
I'm expressing to the board my
expresses to the
concerns.
board, okay?
Yeah.
And thank you, because the public doesn't have the chance to also rebut what you're about to say. The public hearing is over. So I appreciate John has given his thoughts on this. Bill?
I'm not in favor of the project, just point blank. It's too dense, they sold off property to make some money for a business unit. Now they're coming back trying to give us something that's trying to squeeze something in to this property. I'm never in favor of 4-story units. So that's,
Okay. Barry?
I think that the engineer makes a very, very good point that this land is going to be developed at some point. This may be the least impactful of any future development that comes before us. But the traffic on this road, and I don't care what kind of studies we have, the traffic on this road is horrific. Absolutely horrific. You saying that you've been to the soccer a number of times with your kids, you know what we're talking about. Drop a kid off at Willink in the morning, it's a crapshoot as to whether your kids are going to get there on time or not, or you're even going to be able to get out of there. The traffic on this corridor in this area is terrible. And until we get 4 lanes on Hard Road and 3 more lanes on Publishers Parkway, it's not going to get any better. So whatever we add to it now is only going to make everything worse. I'll say it again, this particular project is probably going to be the least impactful project that will appear before us, but I'm not in favor of it.
Patty?
First, I just want to clear something up for all the residents, and many of them, you know, they see trees, they see green, and they want green space forever. And I understand that, I certainly do. But as Councilman Dean said, something will be developed here, because this is not set aside as green space. I appreciate the efforts that you've put into creating as much green space within the project as you can, but I share the concerns of all the concerns that have been spoken already. I'm not a fan of the height of the buildings. The traffic concerns me. I don't know what the future is going to bring, and I don't know what we'll be looking at for this site, but I know that I'm not comfortable with this one.
Thanks. And it's funny, the comprehensive plan was brought up a couple of times, and that's a issue that I guess is very near and dear to me as we sit here in 2021, because it is the 2008 comprehensive plan. So I think everybody knows that it's aged at this point. It's 13 years old. And things that might have made sense in 2008 don't make sense in 2021. I would like to see in the next year or two significant movement made on updating that comprehensive plan. And I would imagine, and I've had preliminary conversations, that certain things like what you just said, Barry, I mean, taking a look at Hard Road in 2021 and looking at Publishers Parkway in 2021, do they need to be expanded? Because there are a couple of senior projects and other things that have gone in the last 5-6 years. And I appreciate, guys, that when you got this approval back in 2015, in parallel to that, there were 2 other senior projects, Monarch and whatever, that were approved. Well, sometimes you get the advantage of hindsight is that, okay, those 2 went up, and now we see the results. Has it added to the traffic? Whether it's added to the traffic at 0.16 cars, I'm a little incredulous about that, but that's neither here nor there. What that zoning will look like in the new comprehensive plan, I don't know. But to your point, Barry, and to everything that everybody said, that might be an area that we really need to take a long, hard look at because of what is there now. I agree that on the 2008 comprehensive plan and the current zoning being OP, that you're right, there may not be another proposal that comes before zoning, planning, or the town board that is less invasive as that. but there may never be a proposal that comes before those boards with the OP, because by that time, we might have changed the comprehensive plan and thought, what is the right zoning and usages for that area in 2022 and 2023, based on what's there. And so, with that in mind, I'm not an advocate of issuing the PDD on this project or on the 875 publishers. Attorney Genesi, I mean, now that we've heard all 5 board members, I mean, from a legal and binding standpoint,
Well, the resolution that was prepared obviously was prepared in the event of an approval. I think you can just state that the application is denied. The application for the board to approve a development plan for the south side of the Publishers Parkway north of State Route 104, tax account number 079.06-01-32.122 as a progressive commercial overlay district, PDD, as presented and sought by Taylor the Builder as the contract vendee of that property.
tell me, Charlie, I don't have to repeat all that. Is that now in the record? And I don't, gentlemen, I'll tell you what. I mean, I first sat down with you back in January. I was in the office for about 2 weeks. There's never a good time to hear no. I'm guessing if this went a different way, the no could have come sooner. And I'm sure it's not a lot of solace to you, but even if we had said yes tonight, when I've taken a look at this, I think you would have been up against it at planning and zoning on this, especially in recent history of what has happened with the public as they've come out against projects. And I think we got a glimpse of that tonight. And by all means, we listen to the public. It doesn't totally guide us on our decisions, but it is an influence, and I think that it would have come out in even more as it got to the planning board and the sketch and the preliminary approval and the final approval, and whatever had to go to the ZBA, because I know there's parts of that plan that would have had to go to the ZBA. I'm not sure exactly which ones, but that becomes somewhat of a moot point now, because this, I think, was first base, and we're not getting there. So, thank you. All right.
Is there going to be a motion?
Well, that's what, Charlie, I just want to make sure that for the record, I mean, we got the public hearing and all that.
Well, I think
I move that we deny the
there's an
application.
there's an acknowledgement of the public hearing.
I second that.
I move that we deny the application.
All right.
I
After
second-
there being a public hearing, you're denying the application.
Correct.
All persons have had the opportunity to be heard, and the applicants had the opportunity to be heard.
Yes.
Councilman Cahill? Councilman Cahill?
Aye.
Supervisor Flaherty?
Aye.
Councilman Capaldi?
Aye.